This is the Web Platform Podcast, episode 40 for reals. And we got Danny Blue coming on.
Don't touch anything, Danny.
Don't touch anything, Danny. Yes, good call, Dan. Nick Niemeyer
Good morning, everybody.
and Tyler McGinnis.
What's up, everyone?
That's our panel, and our guests today are Michael Rogers and Dan Shaw, who are from the Node.js and io.js communities, respectively, and JavaScript and web communities all over. So can you guys just pretty much explain who you are?
All right. I'm Dan Shaw. I packed up my family a few years ago, moved out to San Francisco, the only place where you could get a job doing Node.js at the time, and really found that end-to-end JavaScript experience compelling. The way I was developing fundamentally changed once I was able to iterate rapidly on the back end, rapidly on the front end, and over the years, I've helped a few startups here in the city, Storify, Voxer, among those. Together with Michael, I actually co-founded a consultancy a few years ago called the Node Firm, and then last year founded a company called NodeSource that's dedicated to providing that anchor company in the Node ecosystem where companies can build out 5 to 10 year engineering stories around a company that they know that's going to be there. So we're still growing into that reality, but we've made great strides in the last year, and very happy with how far we've come.
Hey, okay, I'm Michael Rogers. That's Michael spelled fucked up pretty much everywhere.
Not Mikael.
Yeah, exactly.
Mikael.
Yeah. So I've been doing Node stuff since the really earliest days of Node. I think right when it got announced, I used it for about 2 hours. Then I said I'm not going to write anything else ever again. So since then, did a lot of early core HTTP work and wrote requests like an HTTP client. And really got heavily involved in community work. So did a bunch of conferences, including NodeConf. Helped a lot of other people get conferences off the ground and meetups and all that kind of stuff. And more recently, I've gotten pulled into io.js, working on the io.js fork and getting all the ducks in a row. And I don't know, I think I'm sort of the io.js janitor, just whatever kind of problems are going on or things that fall on the floor, I pick them up. That's about it. First question, host.
Oh, wait, that's my cue.
We have other podcast hosts, as the crowd, brutal crowd. Huh?
No, so io.js is fairly new, and there's I've listened to a lot of the podcasts and other interviews that you guys have done, because you're really involved in the community. You got Node Up that you guys are both involved with, and you guys are doing great things, but not everyone knows kind of what io.js is and why it was created. And I know we've gone through that a lot in other podcasts and things. So could you just give a brief overview of the story?
Yeah, I think starting about a year ago, people were increasingly unhappy, especially the people closest to Node Core were unhappy with the way that the project was running and just really getting any kind of forward momentum in terms of releases. And that kind of culminated in a bunch of things. It started where we were just trying to get it put into a foundation or something, and then a slow road to that was Joint trying to do this advisory board thing, and eventually enough people were sort of tired of the slow movement of the bureaucracy on that, and so we decided the best way to move Node forward was really to just fork and start doing releases and all these things that we're talking about for better ways to do project governance and better ways to run the project. Let's just do them. Let's just make them a reality and then see how they work out, and then we'll have a lot more really good evidence in this argument. So
and that's not really an easy decision either. I mean, to say, hey, I'm going to fork this project that there's how many users of and all these people involved. So it's obviously there was some really good reasons within that.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a lot of steps between here and there, right? Like at first, like we were just trying to get them to do, you know, can you hand it over to the contributors to run? And then, when that didn't really work out, we got mired in this other process, and then so okay, well, let's, as sort of like a showing of, hey, what does it look like when we're just collaborating together? We tried to do one under this repository called Node Forward. So we didn't want to like do releases yet. We just wanted everybody collaborating together to work together, right? So the idea was that we just all get together, everybody would be merging and deciding what goes into core in this one fork, and then we just sort of send it as these giant pull requests or something. But that was quickly cut off when Joyent said, you can't call a fork of this even without releases, Node Forward, I'll sue you. So that ended, and then shortly after, I think it's really funny. It wasn't like we went around and around and decided exactly when to do this and what would be strategic. It was really just Fyodor, who's one of the most important and prolific contributors to Node Core. He sent out an email to everybody who was doing Node Forward stuff, like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm sick of this. I'm just going to start landing my stuff in a fork. I'm thinking of calling it io.js. What do you guys think? And that was Thanksgiving weekend, but he had no idea because it was in Russia. So like
everyone was kind of offline and like
right.
Barely
So yeah, so like a day later, there's this io.js fork, and then everybody else just went, well, there's not really any project anywhere without Fyodor, so why don't we just all start landing our patches here? And it has the added benefit that the trademark is owned by a Russian. Like, good luck suing him over IP. As Fyodor put it, good luck suing someone over something that does not exist. And so that was great. And then it just kind of took off from there. I mean, we had already been working on alternative governance policies and contribution policies, and we've been talking about that for a while. So we had a lot of stuff ready to go. But the reaction to it was really spectacular. I mean, we never thought that we would get the kind of traction that we got. We figured that we definitely have more releases and we definitely have probably some more contributors, but to be we're like over 30 committers now. That's crazy. We're about to release a 2.0 with the next version of V8 that we never thought that would happen. And also, really, we've never had better collaboration with the V8 team either. I mean,
right.
We're literally working with them on, like the next, like they're adding tracing into V8 now, and a lot of our feedback for what we want to do with that in Node is making its way into it even before it's done. Like that's just never really happened before. So it's gone incredibly well, and we've continued to iterate on the policies and how we run the project over the last 3 or 4 months to deal with that growth, really.
Yeah, I think it's great. They had the I noticed the process.versions.v8 you can grab. So if you need a specific V8, you want to know what one will work best with this io.js. That's pretty awesome that you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're still hardly bound to a version of V8. So if you get a version of io.js, you get a version of V8.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can check that now much more easily. And I think that that's really more important for if for some reason you wanted to do detection about which parts of ES6 might be implemented in the native language. A better way to check that and to try and do compatibility would be on the V8 version rather than on the io.js version.
So let me get this straight. io.js was born on a Black Friday.
I think it was Thursday, but good story. We'll run with it.
Okay. I'll move on from it. It's okay.
Since Node Black Friday is an official Node.js holiday, all right, I can buy that.
The truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so just diving a little bit more into that, the V8 choice, that for a long time was just a dependency that was there, and we'd always hoped that we would get more engagement from the V8 team, but it really wasn't there. When io.js made the decision to track V8. So it's against Chromium comes out in trains, right? So it's against not head, not canary, but stable. Have we actually been able to achieve that yet, Michael?
Yeah, that's the policy now.
Right.
That's the policy now. And then the V8 that's about to land in 2.0, we're taking because it's in the latest version of Chrome.
Okay. So there were some issues early on with the versions not being not having a functional promises API, native promises API in there. So we went a little bit deeper into the train. But that engagement and that involvement with Google, and us saying that we're like, okay, we value V8, we're going to keep up with it, really sparked something with Google, and they've been not only with the V8 APIs, but debugging APIs. Have been engaging with the Node community and driving that forward. And it's exciting to see, the ES6 feels and with Node come around. And I had someone who's a little bit more front end confront me a couple weeks ago, and it's like, what the hell is going on? Can we curse? Can we curse in this podcast?
I'll edit it out for the audio.
I will not curse. What the heck's going on? And I'll stop it. So what's going on? The Node people were like, oh, you're changing my JavaScript. Leave it alone. Don't mess with that. And now with IO, like, oh yeah, we're all ES6 bros. Like, let const classes, yay. And it's like
the only way to code, man.
Right,
ES6.
it's all about ES6. So that transformation is happening. I think judging from my team at NodeSource, that's happening from the front end back, not from the back end front. There are a few real sort of language nerds like Bradley Meck, who really enjoy some of the low-level constructs, but by and large, the way I see that ES6 adoption happening is front-end folks through Babel are really excited about what ES6 brings, and then the more back-endy systems-y engineers are like, yeah, okay, maybe we'll use a let, a couple hesitant, adoptions of the feature, less excited. So, all that excitement is not coming from your grumpy backenders as much, but I'm excited to see it. And I'm slowly coming around. It was a slow evolution for me to be like, yes, this is a positive thing, but I'm seeing the value, and I'm almost there with generators. Like, if you asked me that 2 years ago, and you're like, generators, like, any value? And I've been like, no, like, get that out. It bastardizes, our asynchronous, all the things. But it has some interesting utilities that that you could use it for. So
It's interesting you bring that up, actually, like, because the generators, a lot of people are adopting them because of Koa, obviously, but there's like in ES7 or 2016, whatever it's going to be, there's async functions, and it's similar to the C# async await. So that looks really, really interesting, but it totally differs from the standard paradigm that you would have with the Pyramid of Death.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very different construct, and we have to look at it and really understand the use case. Something like Ko seemed to force it a little bit too much, whereas the language construct that we're going to do all that in generators. Whereas my appreciation is still some of the smaller edges. I'm really excited to see the async functions evolving as potentially not being totally wedded to promises. An async function wrapped in a generator that produces a promise like a year ago. D. Shaw, you just told me to go to hell.
Go back to PHP.
Right, but I think that we might see that come out without necessarily being wedded to promises. Promises is one of those areas that having helped so many companies unmess themselves up, editing myself, unmess themselves up. A lot of the really, really messed up situations have been, because misuse of promises. So it's a nice construct. Does some things, but Michael wants to jump in on the promises.
Well, I think you can kind of separate the promise problems into two buckets, right? Like one is overuse of an abstraction, which I think that you'll get with any abstraction if you overuse it. The other is like actual sort of platform difficulties, and some of those I think that we actually have worked on at io.js. So because we've had promises in now for 3 months, people have started to look at some of the extra features that they need in the platform in order to support promises. That doesn't mean returning promises from core APIs. It actually means stuff like having a special process.exception for when you get unhandled errors inside of promises globally, and like in 1.0 of Node and even of io.js and also in Node 12, you have this new construct called async wrap that Trevor Norris built, which is like a really low-level way to help debug asynchronous stuff. And those actually aren't in native promises because native promises are like buried in this crazy part of V8, right? So because we've already taken this stuff now, we can start to look at those problems and go, okay, well, let's work with the V8 team to get the hooks that we need for this debugging stuff, and let's start to add features to the rest of the platform.
Yeah.
And then we fix like some of the problems that people get when they use promises, but you're not going to solve the overuse of the abstraction problem. I do want to come back real quick to the generator stuff though, because that's kind of interesting. So we have a repository called ng. It's just like GitHub/iojs/ng, capital NG, and it stands for next generation, where we sort of talk about what a future version of the platform might look like. And it's very sort of experimental discussions and links to different repositories. And we had a thread on there about Co and some of the coroutine community. And the consensus seemed to be, even from people who really like it, that it's a bit of a hack, and that once you have if we move down this path towards async await, that's a much better pattern, and it's much less of a hack, and we'll probably not really see generators being used the way that they've been being used for asynchronous stuff. You'll see generators go back to just being for iterative processing, like a more efficient way of doing iterative processing of stuff, but not for async stuff.
Yeah, most of my experience with the promises has been in the front end. So in Node, I don't even know how it would even work. So it's kind of interesting to hear you guys talk about it, because in the front end it's fine. Like on the client, I love it actually.
Yeah. I mean, you have a lot of different problems. You have a lot of different problems, and also like the number of, the multiplication of modules written by other people interacting with modules written by other people is much higher in the server still. And I mean, even though we're moving towards like a more module driven front end or whatever, it's still like maybe an order of magnitude more on the back end right now in Node. And I think a lot of the things that people trip over are your promises talking to my promises and that kind of stuff. So.
Right, you're far more likely on the front end to have a fairly homogeneous framework surrounding you. I've seen I remember back in the early 2000s, your jQuery plus all the different frameworks, prototype and all of them shoved into one page. But thankfully those days are largely gone.
They still exist in the wild, though, man.
They still exist in the wild, right?
Yeah.
Right. We
Hopefully,
added
it's
note
just
code to
legacy
that
apps,
too.
though.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
All the
like, so,
legacies.
well, API patterns are just like a social contract, right? Like, we're all agreeing that we're all going to do the same thing together. And I think that any abstraction and promises included, like, if you know everybody that also has to agree to these norms, like if they're all on a team together and you're building an app and it's all app code, it's really easy to use any abstraction and to use it well. I think that you find very different API patterns when a lot of people have to agree to use them and to work together without ever communicating to each other. And so that's why a lot of the patterns in the Node ecosystem end up being just a bit simpler because so many other people have to agree to them and use them in order for them to interoperate. And hopefully, for promises to do that, I think they do and have to end up landing in the platform, and then a lot of people have to agree to move to them. And we're just not there yet for other people's modules, but for application code, for everybody that's working together and interacting with each other, they can get on a Skype call together. That's different.
So is IO the latest stable? Is it equivalent to the latest stable of Node as far as like its stability or breaking changes or anything like that?
So we moved to semantic versioning, right? So what that means essentially is that miners, we only add API in miners, and if we're only fixing bugs and patching stuff, we do patch releases. For the first major, so we started with io.js 1.0, and then now we're hitting 2.0. There are a couple breaking changes in it. So one is that the V8 has changed, and it has an ABI change. So that means you're going to have to recompile all your add-ons. This ABI change is really small, and now most native add-ons have moved to using Nan. So the most that you might have to do is upgrade your version of Nan, but you'll probably just have to recompile. And then there's I think 5 other change sets that are relatively minor changes in behavior, but they are changes in behavior, and they have the potential to break things. So we've batched them together for the first major release.
Yeah, we had at Deloitte Digital, we had an issue where some of the versions didn't work well with NVM, right? But the latest always does, the stable. But when we tried to go back to a different I/O, it didn't work, and that's probably not an I/O issue. It's probably an NVM. But what's the integration story with that? Like with all these NAN or NVM and all these other ones.
Yeah, I mean, well, like really early on, we worked really hard to get them on io.js, right? Because especially when you're brand new and you're trying to convince people to try out the software, you really need an easy way for them to go back to their older version or back to the Node 0.10 or whatever. Mm-hmm. Especially because for a lot of compatibility reasons, we have to have a binary called Node. So they're not going to live harmoniously in parallel. You're going to have to pick one. So we worked really hard with them to get them all up to date and get them working, and we don't break them intentionally. I guess they may have some bugs about going backwards that they probably need to fix, but we've tried really hard to keep them keep them not breaking. I saw recently that actually like the latest version of I think like Node Master, which would probably be like an 0.13 or something, it actually broke like all of those guys for some reason. So hopefully that gets reverted before they do a release of that. Yeah, I don't know what it was. I just saw one of the maintainers on Twitter very upset about it. So
yeah, I would be.
Yeah.
So it's ready for production? Is it safe to pitch to employers or clients?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there were some early memory leaks that we found. Those have been fixed. All of the core issues have been fixed. I know that we have more tests and more not disabled tests passing than the Node 12 has.
And the docs are amazing.
Yeah,
I love
the API you're talking about. The API docs?
The API, the io.js API docs are fantastic.
And soon they'll probably be translated into like a dozen languages. Like we've done an amazing job with the international community. Like they're really
so they were in Russian first and then got translated.
No. No, actually, to be honest, the first people to translate are always Asian. Actually, it's always either the Chinese community, the Korean community, or the Japanese community. They're crazy fast.
That's awesome.
There's a huge community there too. There's a little less the cross pollination, cross discussion than I'd like. Like I wish we could have better engagement there, and maybe it's just a language barrier, but huge community there.
It is quite literally a language barrier, yeah.
And it's moving so fast too, though. Like that's crazy that they can keep up.
Yeah, well, I mean, they grew really fast. I mean, so the day that I started, I basically I put out an issue on one of our repositories and said, hey, like, why don't we give people that speak other languages like a place to sort of organize their community and do io.js stuff. And within a day, I had about 150 people sign up for like 30 languages. And so now it's just grown even more since then. So there's well over 200 people participating in all of these like international communities.
So as far as community goes, I know you guys, like you've talked about, you've kind of stressed that a lot. There are a lot of developers who want to contribute, who want to help, who aren't really ready to like do like core contributions yet. So as far as those developers, what can those devs do in order to really help the io.js team or the io.js community?
So I mean, one of the important things to me at least, and also to everybody else like in the io.js TC, was that we created a project where you can contribute to every level of it. I mean, when we left Node.js, people that had been core committers for 4 years couldn't like update the website, right? Like that was a serious problem. And we really, we have this really big, broad community. Like, how do we get more of them involved? And also, the people that are on the io.js TC, like they want to ship core, like they want to deal with core problems and ship core stuff. Anything outside of that, like they're more than happy to have other people kind of take over and own. So I put together this structure for working groups where basically we can say, here's a set of tasks that this group handles, and they have full autonomy over it. So they own it. It's not owned by the TC. They don't have to like report to anybody or whatever. They just get to run with it. And we've used that to basically break off all these different sections of the project so that you can contribute more easily and that you don't have to go through this really big barrier to entry to get code into Node Core specifically. So sort of from core outward, there's a working group for tracing, which works on tracing utilities in the community, also tracing in V8, and is a big collaboration point for the V8 team, and also some of the tracing hooks that go into Node itself. There's also a streams working group that works on readable stream and the core stream implementation as well, if you're really into streams work. And then out from there, you have even more. So there's a website working group that does all of the website work. There's an evangelism working group where we put together the weekly updates and try to get different people speaking and maintain lists of speakers and that kind of stuff. There's a roadmap working group where we try to find new ways of getting feedback from the community so that we can distill it into a set of priorities for the project and then get people excited about working on that stuff and maybe create more working groups to lower the barrier to entry to getting some of that stuff done. And oh man, I know that I'm forgetting other working groups. Oh, there's the build working group. The build working group is huge. So like
right.
The working group handles like all of the releases for Node, all of the testing infrastructure. Also spun out of the build group is another separate working group that only handles the Docker images. So there's a Docker working group if you're interested in that. And then the internationalization community. So every sort of like spoken language has its own community. So we don't do it around a country, and we don't do it around what you would call localization. We just do it around the sort of base language. So for instance, there's a Portuguese community, and they produce localizations for Brazilian Portuguese and for Portuguese and blah blah. So and they're not translators. We don't treat them like translation monkeys where we like throw tasks over the hill or whatever. Like they have their own set of priorities that they think are important for their community, and they handle that. And they're also a collaboration point for speakers in those languages and getting people in those various countries to speak those languages excited about the project. That's why you see one of the things that the roadmap working group produced was a presentation about the roadmap, so you can go to your local meetup and explain to people what io.js is and what kind of stuff that they can get excited about. And that got translated into like 12 languages, so that all across the world now we can have people going to these local meetups and just using this deck and running through it.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, I think so I know there's at least one more with I know Rod just kicked off the LTS, connecting the dots with facilitating adoption. Kicking off in IO. What is the LTS story? io.js has been fairly future looking in everything that's been doing, and now that everything's maturing, beginning to define what LTS means for Node. We're hitting that point of maturity in Node's evolution that we can begin to do that. I don't expect us. This is not going to be a Ubuntu style LTS where it's going to be like 5 years or 10. Not or worse, Red Hat 10 years. At least in the beginning, but beginning to really lay out predictable cycles where you can say, oh, okay, we're moving to IO, and there's evolution happening. But I know that I can get in and have 3 months, 6 months where it's going to be that version, and that version is going to be largely unchanged, and you can track that. That'll really help the corporate adoption of IO just a lot.
Yeah, I mean, now we have our first, major release, so we can say, hey, 1.0, we're going to keep doing, patch and minor releases, on an LTS strategy, and we can really sort of play out all of this stuff. But, if the projects were to merge back together under the foundation, we would then be also saddled with, Node 0.10, potentially 0.8, and also
God,
and then also 0.12 like LTS.
There's still some Node 0.6 installations out there. They exist.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the Node.js project itself doesn't have a very official policy about how this happens, right? They just sort of happen. Releases just go out and under some kind of prioritization that isn't really that formalized. So it really is on us to try and work out how to do this.
And what are the changes coming in 2.0? When can we expect that?
I think you can probably expect it this week. I think it's this week. But there's a new V8, there's a new OpenSSL. Great thing about the new OpenSSL is that it has the stupid little new feature that you need for HTTP2. So now you'll probably see people writing some new HTTP2 parsers. And in fact, there's a pull request right now that's open to core to try and replace the entire core HTTP parser with one in pure JavaScript. So if that goes in, you may actually see that one start to take on HTTP2 support as well.
So maybe I'm looking at this a little differently too. Like the longer I feel like that IO is divergent from Node, the harder it's going to be to reconcile with the versioning and all these different changes. What is the plan for the reconciliation?
Right. So io.js hasn't voted to reconcile yet, but we are working with people from the foundation to figure out what the reconciliation would look like. How would the project run? What does the governance look like? How do we actually merge the code bases together? And then once we have all of that together, it can be presented as, hey, let's vote on whether or not we're going to do this. The current strategy for the versioning is that Node.js has agreed not to go past 1.0 while we're doing this reconciliation effort, so that we're not going to have version overlap. And at this point, if we were to merge back together, the next major release version number after io.js would end up being the next version of Node.js.
Okay, because pretty soon we're going to start seeing io.js meetups and IO schools, instead of Node schools. So.
I'm really heavily involved in Node School. There won't be a fork of Node School anytime soon.
And there won't be an IO source.
Yeah. I mean, it's one community. It's one set of module ecosystem. The reason that there's two core projects is because of differences that we had with the people that used to own it. If we can get past those differences now that it's under this foundation, we should probably merge them back together. I mean, the projects. It's not as though the projects have divergent goals. They had divergent ideas about how to reach those goals, and I think it's pretty clear that the way that we've been doing things leads to far more contributors, far more releases, far more forward progress, and a lot of the concerns that people have about long-term stability really belong in the long-term stability of prior releases. And we I think that we're all there now. And if you look at there's a bunch of documents right now that the foundation has put out, but essentially there is a technical governance structure that is based on the io.js TC model.
Mm-hmm.
It has very few differences from it, and the differences that it does have, we actually really like and kind of support. There's a working group policy that's actually, like, in my opinion, a huge improvement over what we have right now, because one of the things that we have is working groups will essentially be able to be elevated to what you would call like a core status. So if a working group becomes so fundamental to the platform, they just get a seat on the TSC that they elect, which is kind of great. So that would mean basically that, like, the Streams working group would have somebody that they felt really represented Streams well, always representing their interests on the TSC, which would be great. And then the dev policy, which is basically the how the project operates, like when do we take new V8s, what is our versioning strategy, all that kind of stuff. That is an incredibly long document, and it's just about done actually. But it is very much based on a lot of the io.js policies, but also it really codifies and even in some cases improves a little bit upon current io.js practices. So we wrote a lot of policy in the early days, but as happens, in 4 months of a very successful project, we're doing a lot of stuff that we have not gone back and documented yet. So a lot of what that document does is document that in a really good way. And also, I think that there are some things that that Node.js has been trying to put together that are really interesting ideas that we can also try to integrate. So that's all happening in this giant sort of dev policy document.
It's really comforting to hear, though, that you guys are, like, I knew this already, but that you guys are on the same path, the same goal. You're just, faster, getting things done quicker.
Yeah. So I sit on the Node.js advisory board, and that is definitely a slower process. Chris Williams, who is moderator of the advisory board, had a proposal that he wanted to work through on improving the hardware story around Node, and I think the universal recommendation that came back to him was, well, you should go to io.js and create a work group there. So if you want to get embraced and have a lot of support and a lot of community paying attention, that's the most effective forum for that. If you want to sort of affect the long-term political movings of the foundation and whatnot, then the advisory board is still the best place to do that.
Do you think the money involved in the foundation is going to change how the broad community support for io.js works? How do those two things mesh together?
I think that's as the the foundation really finalizes, because it's not done. As the foundation really finalizes, bringing in that community influence is essential. A lot of the reason we are over in the io.js side of things is because of community, and really that sense of ownership that folks have around Node. Node grew up in the open. Everyone had the opportunity to contribute to it and see it grow. And that leads to a natural sense of community and open and ownership. And a foundation that doesn't embrace that reality will lose touch with the Node community.
Well, and the reality is that the community runs the project really well. I mean, we have a very community-driven project in io.js, and it's gone incredibly well, and it runs really well. And really what the foundation wants and the donors want is a project that runs well. I mean, they don't want to run the project themselves. That's why they want a foundation. Like they want the whole technical side and the community side of it to really be owned by the community and driven by them. And then they want to be in a supportive relationship to that, and also in a position where they can more directly influence like legal problems and marketing problems, right? Like if you build an entire hosting company around Node.js, you don't want the official stance of the project to be that your service sucks, or and you don't want the project to adopt some crazy new legal thing where all of your customers now can no longer accept adopting this technology. Like these are the kinds of like real world problems that they're worried about. They don't care about promises. Like they don't have an opinion about promises. They just want that stuff to run.
The thing that I love, I think the most about the io.js and Node.js projects is that the community behind it on GitHub is just, they're really like into it. You can tell the passion and the love that people have for the project. So that's pretty awesome.
That passion tracks somewhat one-to-one with how much ownership you give the community over that.
Yep.
And like one of the brilliant things about the working groups is that they give autonomy to people, right? Like you could really easily imagine like the website working group getting very dissatisfied with working on the website if the TC was constantly going in and telling them like how to design something or how to do something, or they felt in some way subservient to the people that do core C work. But the fact that they get to make all of the decisions about the website and that they have that autonomy really keeps them engaged, and it makes it attractive for other people to also continue to get involved. And that's something that we're not going to let go of. Like that's going to remain the case. And in fact, one of the things that the foundation does too is that we take over, the foundation will own the trademark and like some of the official kind of project assets. And then we can even widen that view even farther, right? Like we can find more aspects of the project and more great things that the community can do and take over, and then give that responsibility over to the community.
Michael, why don't you tell the story of Chris Dickens's bug issue tool? Because I think that's really insightful to how that open embracing that community participation really changes everything in a way.
Yeah. So there's actually a thread in the dev policy about basically how you triage issues in the different projects. And there are people from Node.js talking about that and people from io.js talking about the way that we do it. So it was, in a way, it was kind of a godsend to start over in terms of issues on io.js. We didn't have this giant backlog, right? And that backlog, it can be really debilitating, and most of them aren't even valid anymore. So one of the things that Chris Dickinson wrote when he was more active in Node.js than in io.js, he wrote this little tool called Node Bug Me that would basically present people with a random bug, and then they would try to like add a few things to it and make some editorial changes like to basically classify the bug so that it can get dealt with, and that would make it into this machinery that actually has access to edit the bug. And then the very small number of actual contributors to Node could then figure out how to prioritize these bugs that are coming in. So the way that io.js deals with this is like almost the exact opposite. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that we're not trying to optimize the processes of the project to funnel a bunch of things into a very tiny group of contributors. We actually want to widen the contributor pool as much as possible. So the more contributors you have, the more that you have to parallelize everything that's going on. And you actually can't create bug prioritizations in relation to the entire project. Like, what does priority 1 mean to somebody? Like priority 1 or priority 2? Like like every individual working on the project has a set of priorities that they're going to follow, and they're going to end up picking up the work that they need to do. And so we end up, just kind of tagging things generally, and we end up adding enough people that are contributors to the project that they can just keep, the bug metadata really nice so that people can keep track of the issues that they have. And there's plenty of people around to review everything that's coming in.
It's a totally different mindset in open source with the priorities, right? Because people are volunteering their time. It's not like you have a business where you can say, this is priority, core to our business, core to our users.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Chris or Jeremiah, but in the thread, it was very interesting because we got to this point where, or no, actually, I think I linked to it, and Jacob Kaplan-Moss was talking to me about it. But basically, you have these two models where one, you assume that the people that are running the project are like paid full time to do it, and they have to, right? And then there's a bunch of people that just sort of like throw little bits of free time in, or you just sort of assume that everybody working on the project is doing so in their free time by their own motivation. And like, neither one of those is 100% true. Every project has a little bit of a mix of both of those kinds of people, but one model scales really well to the other people where the other model doesn't. So if you assume that everybody's going to have their own priorities and then a few people actually work on it all the time, they can always find something to do and find something that people care about to work on in that time. Where but the other model, you have a bunch of people sitting around going, well, I really care about this promise feature, but I can't work on it because it's not prioritized and nobody's going to review it, right?
Definitely. And there's one other thing too. I mean, with the bugs, for open source bugs, like if I have something assigned to me, like if I'm on one of the groups or one of the organizations on GitHub or something, I have something assigned to me. I feel bad if I have to prioritize my work time over that, but you have to sometimes. So it's like it's definitely like I want to do it. I have like a passion for it. It's like emotionally driven versus like I have to get this done for work type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've done the same thing where we've really steered clear of like area ownership because it enforces this as well, where you basically say like this person owns this whole domain, they get to veto everything, and then what ends up happening is nobody else ends up working in that area or taking on any responsibility or sharing the knowledge about it, right? And that's a big enough problem just with having such a technical barrier to entry and just learning half of this stuff. So having a model where like that's just not the case, where everybody's just a contributor and everybody gets everything reviewed by at least one other person. You end up seeing people naturally gravitate to the things that they care about, and because they are an owner in a way of the whole project, they have a shared sense of responsibility with everybody else. They do feel like they should be doing something and they should be contributing, but they don't have the negative part of it where you go like, hey, don't touch that, that's my thing.
Oh no, not at all. I haven't seen that in any project actually.
Oh man, you should work on Mozilla. There's a lot of that.
All right, so I have one last question for me, and then we can get information on how people can contact you. So reconciliation, big topic we've talked about. Where are we today?
So today the dev policy is pretty much done. The working group project lifecycle stuff, how the working groups would merge, like that stuff is almost done. Looks really good. The very last thing is there's going to be a convergence working group that comes together with people from Node and from IO to basically figure out how we would merge the code bases together, where we would start, like how that really technical side of it works.
Has a timeline been sort of like roughed out?
We've really been trying to stay away from timelines because there's a lot of moving parts, and we don't want it to look too linear. We want to try to parallelize a lot of the effort that's going on. I mean, the foundation people still have legal documents that they have to put together just to have the foundation up and all that kind of stuff. So we don't want anybody to feel like they're blocking each other. So that's going to work. That's working itself out, and then once that is there, like once those documents all exist, and it's everything that io.js as a project would be agreeing to if we were to merge the project together and come into the foundation. Once all of that's together, then we'll have a bigger, wider discussion about like here's the differences that we're agreeing to, and these are the things that the foundation is bringing, and then we'll have a vote from the TC members and the collaborators.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on. This has been really great, very educational. I'm surprised that D. Shaw didn't ask you to write the whole thing in CoffeeScript, but we'll table that one though.
CoffeeScript, as much as ES6 is a great thing, CoffeeScript is pleasantly dying. So that's a good thing.
And re-emerging in other forms.
There you go.
Yeah, like if you look at the NPM stats, like CoffeeScript is falling, and then the two promise implementations are rising. So.
So if people want to learn more about io.js or the Node community, how they can get started, like Tyler brought up a great point earlier. How do you get into this at a very low level, like if you don't know anything? How can people find you? Like, what's your Twitter handles, and where do people need to go to find out more information, how they can help?
I am at Mikael, Mikeal, on Twitter and on GitHub. And I think the first place to start with io.js is you can just go to the website, and there's a really nice kind of simple overview of what's in there. There's also a great page on the ES6 features that are currently in the latest stable version. And if you want to see kind of like where the priorities are, you can go to roadmap.iojs.org, and that is a like web presentation on a bunch of the things that we think are important for the roadmap that we want to get people excited about. And in every single one of those slides, or almost every single one, there's a link to some repository somewhere where you can actually get involved with that work specifically. Yeah, that's it.
Great, and so I'm D Shaw on Twitter. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and best way to sort of follow up. You can also send me an email at dshaw@nodesource.com. At nodesource.com, you can find out about NodeSource and what we're doing to help large-scale deployments of Node.js and JavaScript. We shared the IO. JS side of the aisle. Why don't I rep the advisory board end of things? I've included a link to the advisory board where some of the stuff is being drafted. You can also head to nodeadvisoryboard.com, and it's without the JS, so nodeadvisoryboard.com. And there's a Slack channel there, and you can tune into the bi-weekly calls. We finally moved the advisory board calls from 90% private to 90% public. That's a big evolution in the last few weeks.
Congrats.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of that. We've with that move into being more open, more in the public. We've seen greater engagement during those open sessions. So if you have questions, head to nodeadvisoryboard.com, and it's our responsibility to ask the questions and make sure that those the community interests are addressed. So one way that you can sort of help that process is, and if you have the time to sort of wade through the slower, more political process, we do need community-minded people that are participating there and helping that as well. So if you have some time, join us on the weekly call, or send me any questions that you have. And I'm happy to help move that forward.
And you added those links to our show notes?
I did. I haven't added the nodeadvisoryboard.com, but I will right now.
Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your time. I know you got to run because you're going to speak over FluentConf. So that's awesome to hear. Hopefully that'll be available publicly so we can all check it out.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it will.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for having us on. Yeah.
Great, man. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Take it easy.